of rocks out there, a small rock to hold and a big rock to hide behind, while he waited for Vorbis. And that thought was habit too. Revenge? Here? He smiled. Be sensible, man, you're a soldier. This is a desert. You crossed a few in your time. A desert is what you think it is. And now you can think clearly. There were no lies here, just you and what you believed. What have I always believed? That on the whole, and by and large, if a man lived properly, not according to what any priest said, but according to what seemed decent and honest inside, then it would at the end, more or less, turn out all right. The desert looked better already. Fry it. Set out. Sergeant Simony and his soldiers rode ahead. They were trailed by the servants and lesser priests. Vorbis rode in the rear like a shepherd watching over his flock. BhaRhaTah rode with him, and Vorbis seemed to derive some amusement from his company. How many miles have we travelled, BhaRhaTah? 4 miles and 7 estado, Lord. And how long has our journey taken? 79 minutes. He turned gingerly in the saddle. There was a cloud of dust about a mile behind them. Here come the rest of the soldiers. The rest of the soldiers? Sergeant Akhtar and his men. I saw them before we left. You did not see them. You will forget about them. After a few minutes, the distant cloud turned off the road, reached the top of the dunes, and vanished in the silent wastes of the desert. BhaRhaTah tried to put it out of his mind, which was like trying to empty a bucket under water. No one survived in the high desert. There were terrors in the burning heart, an ocean without water, voices without mouths. The party paused on a hill and looked at the sea. It washes unholy shores, BhaRhaTah, said Vorbis, and gives rise to dangerous ideas. Men should not travel. As you travel, so error creeps in. Yes, Lord. In Osiris' day, we sailed alone in boats made of hide, and went where the winds of the god took us. That's how a holy man should travel. I think that Osiri once sailed to the island of Erebos on a millstone. Nothing is impossible for the strong in faith. Try striking a match on jelly, mister. The voice of the turtle was heard in the land. BhaRhaTah stiffened, but Vorbis's horse trotted on. Ilderim was nothing more than a few shacks around a stone jetty, at which was a trireme flying the holy oriflamme. The horses were led one at a time up the gangplank. BhaRhaTah found a place up near the pointed end, and he opened the box. The tortoise spoke from deep within its shell. Any eagles about? BhaRhaTah scanned the sky. Oh, the head shot out. Where are we? On a boat, on the sea. Wobbling. BhaRhaTah's stomach lurched, even though the boat had hardly cleared the jetty. They say that the god is sending us a fair wind. I am? Oh yes. Flat as a mill race the whole way. Mill pond, I meant mill pond! In his box, tossed and shook as BhaRhaTah staggered across the moving deck and reached the rail. To anyone except the novice, the boat was clipping through the waves on a good sailing day. Seabirds wheeled in its wake. Ah, feeding the fishes, I see. No, Lord, I'm being sick. BhaRhaTah turned, and there was the Exquisitor, smiling. Him! Him! Screamed the voice of the tortoise. I'd know him anywhere! BhaRhaTah felt the box trembling as bounced around inside. Kill him! Push him overboard! Come to the prow, BhaRhaTah, said Vorbis. There are many interesting things to be seen, according to the captain. BhaRhaTah trailed behind him and risked a whisper. What's the matter? Vorbis half turned. We will have our minds broadened, I'm sure. He pointed to a large bird gliding down the face of the waves. The pointless albatross, said the captain promptly. Really?
BhaRhaTah!
Shouted the tortoise.
Are you listening to me? He turned me over in the sun.
And over there? Oh, flying fish. And down there? Porpoises. Sort of a fish. Do they always swim around ships like this? Certainly. Vorbis leant over the rail. This left a gap in the conversation which the captain very stupidly sought to fill. They'll follow a ship for days. A tar pit of silence. This must be very convenient. It must be like having a travelling larder. The captain smiled. Oh, no, Lord, we don't eat them. You know the old saying, Lord? Saying that after they die, the souls of dead sailors become... The captain saw the abyss ahead. For a while, there was no sound. But of course, we are not prey to such superstitions. Well, of course, idle sailor talk. Vorbis was looking past his ear. You there? Fetch me a harpoon. A sailor scuttled off obediently. But your lordship should not attempt such sport. A harpoon is a dangerous weapon. You might do yourself an injury. But I will not be using it.
Warp drive active.
The captain hung his head and held out his hand for the harpoon. BhaRhaTah lay on his back among sails and ropes under the decking. It was hot, and the air smelt of all air that has come into contact with bilges. But being cruel to animals doesn't mean he's a bad person. The harmonics of BhaRhaTah's tone suggested that even he didn't believe this. It had been quite a small porpoise. Besides, he's been kind to me.
He turned me on my back. Have you looked at that man's mind?
Humans can't read minds.
I don't mean reading them. I mean seeing the shape of them.
Remembered Vorbis's mind, as impenetrable as a steel ball. He'd never seen a mind shaped like that on anything walking upright. A mind like that could do anything. But what he had to work with was BhaRhaTah, with a mind as incisive as a meringue. And if BhaRhaTah died...
How are you feeling? You snuggle down under the sails a bit more. You don't want to catch a chill? There's got to be someone else, he thought. If you want to be up there again, it can't just be him who believes in me. Really, in me. Not in a pair of golden horns. And now he's got himself involved with an eagle kind of person, if ever there was one.
Was aware of mumbling.
What are you doing?
Praying.
What for?
You don't know?
Oh.
If BhaRhaTah dies... The tortoise shuddered in its shell. If BhaRhaTah died, then it could already hear in its mind's ear the soughing of the wind in the deep, hot places of the desert, where the small gods went. Ragged clouds ripped across the skies. The sails creaked in the rising wind. White water crowned the waves. It was going to be a big storm. BhaRhaTah snored in his nest. Listened to the sailors. Someone had killed a porpoise, and everyone knew what that meant. It meant the ship was going to be sunk. Wondered if tortoises could swim. Turtles could. Those buggers had the shell for it. Well, nothing else for it. He was still a god. He had rights. He slid down a coil of rope and crawled carefully to the edge of the swaying deck. Then he spoke. Nothing happened for a while. Then one wave rose higher than the rest and changed shape as it rose. Water poured upward, filling an invisible mould. It rose level with the deck, developed a face, and opened a mouth. Well...
Greetings, O Queen of...
The watery eyes focused. But you are just a small god. You dare summon me?
I have believers, so I have rights.
And what rights do you demand?
Save the ship.
The Queen of the Sea was silent.
You have to grant the request. It's the rules.
But I can name my price. It will be high.
It will be paid.
The column of water began to collapse back into the waves. I will consider this. The ship rolled, sliding Om back down the deck. A flailing foreclaw hooked itself around a stanchion as Om's shell spun around, and for a moment both hind legs paddled helplessly over the waters. Something white swept down towards him, and he bit it. BhaRhaTah yelled and pulled his hand up, with Om trailing on the end of it. You didn't have to bite! The ship pitched and flung him to the deck. Om let go. When BhaRhaTah got to his knees, he saw the crewmen standing around him. Two of them grabbed him and dragged him towards the rail. Om screamed at the Sea Queen.
It's the rolls! The rolls!
He could hear, above the roaring of the storm, the silence of the desert. Wait, said BhaRhaTah. What are you doing?
It's nothing personal, said one of the sailors. The sea wants a life, yours is nearest.
Can I pray to my God first? The sailors looked at one another. It was probably not wise to antagonize any god. The ship skidded down the side of a wave.
You got 10 seconds.
BhaRhaTah lay down on the deck. Another wave slammed into the timbers. Om was dimly aware of the prayer. He couldn't make out the words, but the prayer itself was an itch at the back of his mind.
Don't ask me, he said. I'm out of options.
The ship smacked down onto a calm sea. The storm still raged. The lightning surrounded them like the bars of a cage. Electric fire raged overhead. But the ship sped down a narrow channel of calm between grey walls of storm a mile high. And then they could hear the thunder dying away. BhaRhaTah got uncertainly to his feet. The sailors had fled. Om?
Over here.
BhaRhaTah fished his god out of the seaweed. You said you couldn't do anything.
I made arrangements. But there will be a price, he thought. It won't be cheap.
Tidal waves, a couple of towns disappearing under the sea, something like that.
Seems unfair, really. One man killed a porpoise. What am I thinking about, he thought. Before I was a tortoise, I didn't even know what unfair meant.
There were no more storms. The ship ploughed on in favourable winds under a clear sky. The days passed uneventfully. Vorbis stayed below decks for most of the time. The coast here was dunes with the occasional barren salt marsh. A heat haze hung over the land. It was the kind of coast where shipwrecked landfall is more to be dreaded than drowning. Towards the evening of the fourth day, the unedifying panorama was punctuated by a glitter of light. It flashed with a sort of rhythm. The captain called BhaRhaTah over. The deacon told me to watch out for this, he said. Vorbis had a cabin somewhere near the bilges where the air was as thick as thin soup. BhaRhaTah knocked.
Enter.
There were no portholes down here. Vorbis was sitting in the dark.
Yes, BhaRhaTah?
Something's shining in the desert, Lord.
Good. Tell me what you saw in the desert.
There were 6 flashes, and then a pause of about 5 heartbeats, and then 8 flashes, another pause, and 2 flashes. Vorbis nodded thoughtfully.
All praise to the great God. He is my staff and guide through hard places. You may go.
Next day the ship rounded a headland, and Ephebi lay before it, a spilling of blindingly white houses all the way up a rock. It seemed of considerable interest to Sergeant Simony. As the crew made ready for port, BhaRhaTah watched the soldier who stood at the prow, staring fixedly as the city drew nearer. It was unusual to see him away from Vorbis. Wherever Vorbis stood, there was the sergeant, hand on sword, always silent, except when spoken to. Looks very white, doesn't it? BhaRhaTah said. The city. Very white. The sergeant turned slowly and stared. His stare was pure, simply hatred. The Ephebians were expecting them. Soldiers lined the quay. There were a lot of them. BhaRhaTah trailed along, the voice of the tortoise insinuating itself in his head.
So, the Ephebians want peace, do they? Doesn't look like that. Looks like we took a pasting and we're suing for peace. That's what it looks like to me.
BhaRhaTah stared around. At intervals, along the road from the docks were white stone statues. What are they?
Well, the tubby one is Tuvelpit, the god of wine. The broad with the hairdo is Astoria, goddess of love, a complete bubblehead. And the ugly one is Offler, the crocodile god, not a local boy. He's a Lachian originally, but the Ephebians thought he was a good idea.
You talk as if they were real.
They are.
There is no other god but you. You told Osiri that.
Well, I exaggerated a bit.
One of the goddesses had been having some very serious trouble with her dress.
Petulia, goddess of negotiable affection, said Om, worshipped by the ladies of the night.
A god for painted Jezebels?
Why not? There used to be none there. Look, belief is where you find it. There's even a god of lettuce somewhere.
A god of lettuce?
Why not? If enough people believe, you can be a god of anything.
Oh. BhaRhaTah had walked into the back of a sub-deacon. The party had halted. A man was running down the street. He was quite old, and something about him made people think of the word spry, but at the moment they would be much more likely to think of the words mother naked and dripping wet. In fact, none of the people in the street gave him a second glance. BhaRhaTah tugged at the cloak of one of the Ephebian soldiers. Excuse me, why did we stop? Philosophers have right of way. What's a philosopher?
Someone who's bright enough to find a job with no heavy lifting.
An inventor of fallacies, said Vorbis as they marched onwards.
The cursed city attracts them like a dung heap attracts flies. Actually, Ephebe's known for its philosophers.
A lot of old men running around with no clothes on?
More or less.
They don't sound much use to me.
Look at the highest tower on the rock.
BhaRhaTah looked up. At the top of the tower, secured by metal bands, was a big disc that glittered in the morning light. What is it?
The reason why Omnia hasn't got much of a fleet anymore. That's why it's worth having a few philosophers around. 1 minute it's does a falling tree in the forest make a sound if there's no one there to hear it, and then one of them says, incidentally, a 30-foot parabolic reflector to shoot the rays of the sun at an enemy's ships would be very interesting. The one before that was some kind of an underwater thing that shot sharpened logs into the bottom of ships.
The party had reached a gateway. The Ephebian captain turned. The visitors must be blindfolded.
This is outrageous, said Vorbis. We are here on a mission of diplomacy.
That is not my business. My business is to say if you want to go through, you wear a blindfold. This is one of them life choices.
Very well. Under protest.
The blindfold was quite soft and totally opaque, but as BhaRhaTah was led, 10 paces along a passage, then left 5 paces, diagonally forward and left 3.5 paces, right 103 paces, down 3 steps, turned around 17 1/4 times, down a slope that went down a metre every 10 paces for 30 paces, and BhaRhaTah wondered what good it was supposed to do. The blindfold was removed in an open courtyard. Bowmen lined the yard. A bald, skinny man was waiting for them.
My name is Aristocrates. I am secretary to the tyrant. Please ask your men to put down their weapons.
Vorbis drew himself up to his full height.
We are entitled to retain our arms. We are an emissary to a foreign land. Not a barbarian one. Barbarian? You burnt our ships.
Aristocrates held up a hand.
This is a discussion for later. I am sure you would like to rest after your journey. You are, of course, at liberty to wander anywhere in the palace. And can we leave the palace? If you remember the way. But I must warn you, our ancestors put into the labyrinths many traps. Now, if you would follow me.
The Omnians were housed in little rooms around a central courtyard. There was a fountain in the middle, in a small grove of sweet-smelling pine trees. There was a bowl of fruit in BhaRhaTah's cell, and a plate of cold meat. He fished the god out of his box. "There's fruit," he said.
So, eat up quick. You've got to go and find a philosopher.
Find a philosopher?
Right. Someone who can help me stop being a tortoise.
But Vorbis might want me.
You're just going for a stroll. And hurry up. There's other gods in Ephebi. I don't want to meet them right now. Not looking like this.
The labyrinth of Ephebi is ancient and full of 101 amazing things you can do with hidden springs, razor-sharp knives and falling rocks. There isn't just one guide through it, there are 6, and each one knows his way through 1/6 of the labyrinth. The furthest anyone ever got without a guide was 19 paces. Well, his head rolled a further 7 paces, but that probably doesn't count. All of this was totally lost on BhaRhaTah, who padded amiably along the tunnels and corridors, and at last pushed open the gate into the late evening air. The city of Ephebi surrounded them. Dogs barked. Somewhere a cat yowled. Then a door burst open down the street, and there was the cracking noise of a large wine amphora being broken over someone's head. A skinny old man in a toga picked himself up from where he had landed, pulled a cobblestone loose, and dived back through the doorway. There was a distant scream of rage.
Ah, philosophy,
said BhaRhaTah peered cautiously round the door. Inside the room, 2 groups of men in togas were trying to hold back 2 of their colleagues. "He bloody well accused me of slander," one was shouting. "I didn't! You did! I merely suggested that if Zeno said all Ephebians are liars..." "See? He did it again! Then, since Zeno is himself an Ephebian, he himself is a liar, and therefore I'm going to lay one right on you, pal." "Excuse me, please," BhaRhaTah said. The philosophers froze. "Are you all philosophers?" The one called Zeno stepped forward. "That's right, we think, therefore we am." "Ah," Zeno spun around. "I've had it up to here with you, Ibid." He turned back to BhaRhaTah. "We are, therefore we am. That's it." "Have you been fighting?" "Fighting? Us? We're philosophers," said Ibid, shocked. "But you were..." "The cut and thrust of debate," Zeno said. "Thesis plus antithesis equals hysteresis," said Ibid. "The stringent testing of the universe, the hammer of the intellect upon the anvil of fundamental truth." "Shut up! And what can we do for you, young man?" "Ask them about gods." I want to find out about gods." "Gods? Relics of an outmoded belief system." There was a rumble of thunder from the clear evening sky. "Except for blind Io, the thunder god." Lightning flashed across the sky. "And Kubal, the fire god." A gust of wind rattled the windows. "Flatulus, the god of the winds, he's all right too." Then Ibid said, "Forgal, the god of avalanches? Where's the snow line?" 200 miles away." They waited. Nothing happened. "Relic of an outmoded belief system." They all seemed to feel a lot better about this. After a while they relaxed and seemed to forget about BhaRhaTah. Only now did he take in the room. He'd never seen a tavern before. The bar ran along one side of the room. Behind it were stacks of wine jars, racks of amphora, and cheery pictures of Vestal virgins on cards of salted peanuts and goat jerky, pinned up in the hope that there really were people in the world who would buy more packets of nuts in order to look at a cardboard nipple. What's all this stuff?
How should I know? Let me see.
BhaRhaTah unfastened the box and lifted the tortoise out.
"Oh, typical tavern. See that man clearing mugs? Say unto him, give me a..."
"But alcohol mocks the mind of man," says the prophet Ossuary.
"I never said it. Now, talk to the man."
In fact, the man talked to BhaRhaTah. "Evening, sir. What'll it be?" "I'd like a drink of water, please."
"Wine."
"And something for the tortoise?" "What do tortoises usually drink?" Normally a drop of milk with some bread in it."
"Bread and milk?"
"You get a lot of tortoises?" "Oh, very useful philosophical animal, your average tortoise. Outrunning metaphorical arrows, beating hares in races, very handy." I haven't got any money." The barman leant towards him. "Tell you what, if the Clivities are just brought around, he won't mind. We get all sorts in here. Stoics, cynics, big drinkers, the cynics. Epicureans, stochastics, Anaxandrites, epistemologists, peripatetics, synoptics, all sorts. That's what I always say. It takes all sorts to make a world. Are you a philosopher? Oh, kind of rubs off on you after a while.
Not even fresh bread,
muttered Om, nose deep in his saucer.
And the milk's off.
Down the other end of the bar, the philosophers had started fighting again. Tell me, said BhaRhaTah, do any of them know much about gods? Oh, you'd want a priest for that sort of thing. No, I mean, what gods are, how gods came to exist, that sort of thing. The barman leant forward. If you haven't got any money, I don't think you're going to get much help. Talk isn't cheap around here. There's the expenditure on soap for a start, loofahs, pumice stones, bath salts, it all adds up. There was a gurgling noise from the saucer.
We've got to have a philosopher. I can't think, and you don't know how to.
You can try old Didactylus. He's about as cheap as they come. Doesn't use expensive soap? Doesn't use any soap at all. Where can I find Mr. Didactylus? In the palace courtyard, next to the library. Just follow your nose. We'll be going then. Don't forget your tortoise. There's good eating on one of them.
May all your wine turn to water.
Will it? Said BhaRhaTah, as they stepped out into the night.
No.
Why exactly are we looking for a philosopher?
I want my power back.
But everyone believes in you.
If they believed in me, they could talk to me. No one is worshipping any other gods in Omnia, are they?
They wouldn't be allowed to. The Quisition would see to that.
Yeah, it's hard to kneel if you have no knees. Come on, let's get back.
In the middle of the night, Om awoke. There were noises from BhaRhaTah's bed. BhaRhaTah was praying again. Om listened curiously. He could remember prayers. There'd been a lot of them once, even if the words weren't worth listening to. And he had smitten good and hard in his time. Now he could just about walk through water and feed the One. BhaRhaTah's prayer was a piccolo tune in a world of silence. Om waited until the novice was quiet again, and then walked out, rocking from side to side, into the dawn. Vorbis glowered at the back of the head of Aristocrates, who was leading the party. All over the world there were rulers with titles like the Exalted, the Supreme, and Lord High Something or other. Only in one small country was the ruler elected by the people, and they called him the Tyrant. Candidates for the tyrantship were elected by the placing of black or white balls in various urns, thus giving rise to a well-known comment about politics. The tyrant was a fat man with skinny legs, giving the impression of an egg that was hatching upside down. He was sitting in the middle of the marble floor, in a chair surrounded by scrolls. "Oh, the Omnium delegation!" A smile flashed across his face, like something small darting across a stone. He looked down again. "I am Deacon Vorbis of the Citadel Quisition." "Yes, I know. You torture people for a living. Please, be seated. I have nearly finished."
Finished what?
The peace treaty.
But that is what we are here to discuss.
No, that is what you are here to sign. Library, library, library. Om stumped along a cobbled alley. He paused at the point where it opened into yet another courtyard. There were voices. Mainly, there was one voice. This was the philosopher Didactylus. Although one of the most quoted philosophers of all time, Didactylus the Ephebian never achieved the respect of his fellow philosophers. They felt he wasn't philosopher material. They asked questions like, is truth beauty, and is beauty truth? But Didactylus posed the famous philosophical conundrum, yes, but what's it really all about then, when you get right down to it, I mean really? And many people have quoted from his famous meditations, it's a rum old world all right, but you've got to laugh, haven't you? Om crawled closer to the voice. There was a very large barrel against the far wall, a sign chalked on a board. Didactylus and nephew, practical philosophers, no proposition too large, fresh axioms every day. In front of the barrel, a short man in a toga that must have once been white was kicking another one who was on the ground.
"Earn, you lazy bugger! I turn my back for half an hour and you go to sleep on the job."
What job? We haven't had anything since Mr. Paloxy the farmer last week, and he only paid in olives.
"I shall probably get a good price for them olives."
They're rotten, Uncle.
"Nonsense! You said they were green."
They're supposed to be black.
"We got 3 obols for doing that proverb for Grillos the cobbler."
No, he brought it back. His wife didn't like the colour.
"Which one was it?"
"It's a wise crow that knows which way the camel points."
"I put a lot of work in on that one."
He said he couldn't understand it.
"I don't understand cobbling, but I know a good pair of sandals when I wears them."
Blinked his one eye. He had found a thinker. He looked up at the wall behind the barrel. Further along was an impressive set of marble steps leading up to some bronze doors, and over the doors was the word Librum. He'd spent too much time looking. Ern's hand clamped itself onto his shell.
Hey, there's good eating on one of these things.
Peace negotiations were not going well.
"You attacked us," said Vorbis.
"I call it preemptive defence," said the tyrant.
"You stoned our envoy, an unarmed man."
"He brought it upon himself, Aristocrates will tell you."
The tall man nodded.
"By tradition, anyone may speak in the marketplace, and at first everything was fine because people were laughing, and then your priest pushed over a statue of Tuvelpit, the god of wine, so they threw stones at him. Not many, and only after they'd run out of vegetables. They threw vegetables when they couldn't find any more eggs, and when we came to remonstrate—"
"I'm sure 60 ships intended more than remonstrating," said the tyrant. "And we have warned you, Lord Vorbis, there will be more raids on your coast unless you sign."
He looked towards the sky, visible between the pillars.
"And now it is nearing noon. The day heats up. I suggest we meet again at sunset."
"I think our deliberations may take longer. Shall we say tomorrow morning?"
"As you wish. In the meantime, the palace is at your disposal. When you require meals, mention the fact to the nearest slave."
"In we have no word for slave."
"So I understand. I imagine that fish have no word for water."
BhaRhaTah stood up, knocking over his bench. He thought,
"They lied about Brother Murdoch. Vorbis said they beat him within an inch of his life and flogged him the rest of the way, and Brother Noomrod said he saw the body. Why don't I believe any of it? And what did he mean about fish not having a word for water?"
Another bowl of fruit was waiting on the table in BhaRhaTah's cell. There was also a man sweeping the floor.
Are you a slave?"
"Yes, master."
"That must be terrible."
The man leant on his broom.
"You're right. I only get 1 day off a week."
BhaRhaTah, who had never heard the words day off before, nodded.
"Why don't you run away?"
"Oh, done that. Run away for a fortnight into Jelly Baby every winter."
"Do you get brought back?"
"No, I have to come back by myself. It's in lifts on ships."
"You come back?"
"Yeah. Abroad's all right to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there."
"Yeah, but you're not free."
"Oh, what's the difference?"
You don't get any days off?"
"Really? I think I'll give freedom a miss then, thanks."
Have you seen a tortoise anywhere around?"
"You want one? There's good eating on it."
No. It's all right." "He's probably in trouble," BhaRhaTah thought as he hurried through the city. "Everyone wants to eat tortoises. But he hasn't screamed for me," he thought. "So maybe no one's cooking him."
He reached the courtyard in front of the library. It was crowded with philosophers, all craning to look at something.
"I've got 10 obols, says it can't do it again."
There was a breathless pause.
"There. That's never a right angle. I'd like to see you do better." "What's he doing now?"
"The hypotenuse, I think." There was another pause, then a cheer.
"Yeah! All right! Double or nothing.
Bet it can't do a dodecagon. It's a shame to take your money. Another pause. Oh, 10 sides? Told you it wasn't any good. Another daft idea, Didactylus. The mass of philosophers broke up. BhaRhaTah caught a glimpse of a circle of damp sand covered with geometrical figures. Was sitting in the middle of them. "How did we do, Ern?" said Didactylus. 52 old balls up, master. Pity it didn't know the difference between 10 and 12, though. Cut one of its legs off and we'll have a stew." "Cut off a leg?" "Well, you don't eat it all at once." Didactylus turned his face towards a plump young man with splayed feet and a red face. "Yes?" "The tortoise does know the difference between 10 and 12. Damn thing just lost me 80 old balls." "Yes, but tomorrow," the boy began, as if he was carefully repeating something. "Tomorrow, you should be able to get odds of 3 to 1. Didactylus's mouth dropped open. "Give me the tortoise, Ern." "He's a god," said BhaRhaTah. "Really?" Didactylus turned over. "The turtle moves," said Ern thoughtfully. "What?" said BhaRhaTah. "Master did a book." "Oh, just a little thing I knocked off," said Didactylus, running his fingers over Om's shell. "Look, I'm looking for a philosopher, one that knows about gods." "What do you want to know about gods?" BhaRhaTah appeared to be listening. "How they start, how they grow, and what happens to them afterwards." Didactylus put the tortoise into BhaRhaTah's hands. "Costs money, that kind of thinking." "Let me know when we've used 52 obols worth." Didactylus grinned. "Right, come on into the library." He reached down beside him and picked up a rusty iron lantern. Suddenly, it dawned on BhaRhaTah. "You're blind." "That's right." "But you carry a lantern." "It's all right, I don't put any oil in it." "A lantern that doesn't shine for a man that doesn't see?" "Yeah, works perfectly." "And you live in a barrel?" "Very fashionable a barrel. Most of the philosophers do it. It shows contempt for worldly things. Mind you, Legibus has got a sauna in his." "The library," announced Didactylus. BhaRhaTah looked around. Scrolls protruded from their racks like cuckoos piping the hour. "These are all books?" "Oh, yes," said Didactylus. "Everyone writes them here. You can't stop the buggers." "And people can read them?" Omnia was based on one book, and here were hundreds. "Wisdom of the ages, this. Got to write a book, see, to prove you're a philosopher. Then you get your official loofah." "And this is the book Didactylus wrote," said Ern. BhaRhaTah looked down at a picture of a turtle. There were elephants on its back, and on them something with mountains and a waterfall of an ocean around its edge. "How can this be? A world on the back of a tortoise? This can't be true." "Tell that to the mariners. Everyone who's ever sailed the Rim Ocean knows it." "But surely the world is a perfect sphere, spinning about the sphere of the sun, as the Septuagint tells us. That seems so logical. That's how things ought to be." "Ought? That's not a philosophical word."
"Gods," Om prompted. "We're here to ask about gods."
"But is all this true?" said BhaRhaTah. Didactylus shrugged. "Could be, could be. We are here and it is now. After that, everything tends towards guesswork." "You don't know it's true?" "I think it might be. I could be wrong." BhaRhaTah's mind was on fire. These people weren't sure. But he'd been sure, and Deacon Vorbis had a sureness you could bend horseshoes around. Sureness was a rock. "You don't like it, do you?" BhaRhaTah had said nothing. "I know about sureness. Before I was blind, I went to Omnia once, and in your citadel I saw a crowd stoning a man to death in a pit. It was a horrible sight." "It has to be done," BhaRhaTah mumbled, "so the soul can be shriven." "Oh, I'm not talking about the poor bugger in the pit. I'm talking about the people throwing the stones. They were sure all right. They were sure it wasn't them in the pit." Ern reappeared with another scroll. "I've got Abraxas's on religion. Old charcoal Abraxas, said Didactylus, suddenly cheerful again. Struck by lightning 15 times so far. You can borrow this one overnight if you want.
This is it, said Om. Come on, let's leave this idiot.
He spent years researching it. Went out into the desert talking to the small gods. Talked to some of our gods too, brave man. He says gods like to see an atheist around, gives them something to aim at. BhaRhaTah unrolled a bit of the scroll. Is that how people read in Omnia? Said Ern. What, upside down? I think, said BhaRhaTah, that I'd better be going. I'm sorry to have intruded on your time. He picked up the tortoise, glared at Ern, and strode as haughtily as possible out of the library.